Hello, and welcome to our first Teacher Strategies for Distance Learning webinar. CABE is proud to present a series of special speakers who will be sharing effective practices to support English learners and learners of other languages. I am Ruby Flores, Acting Director of Professional Learning. I hope you are in a safe space managing the circumstances due to COVID-19 and ready to join together with your CABE familia today. I am pleased to introduce to you Dr. Carmen Beck, one of CABE's professional development consultants and a professor in the Educational Leadership Department at Cal State San Bernardino. Carmen?
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's webinar is being presented by our longtime friend, professor at Whittier College, Dr. Ivannia Soto. As we get ready for today's exciting session, I have a few housekeeping matters to share. As this is a webinar, the speakers' microphones will be active and the participants will be on mute. There will be interactive times in today's presentation, and we will be using the chat box for you to enter your comments. If you would like to post a question during the presentation, please also use the chat icon on the Zoom control menu at the bottom of your screen, and the chat window will pop up where you will be able to type in your questions or comments. For better focus, we will not be using the Q&A icon or window for today. After the webinar, we will be posting the recorded version so you can re-listen and share it with others. Sit back, relax, and get ready for 30 minutes of powerful engagement and learning. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Ivannia Soto. Thank you, Ivannia.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Thank you to CABE for the opportunity to present today. Our presentation today will have three different parts to it. First, the research based behind reciprocal teaching, including how to use reciprocal teaching in a virtual setting, as well as the benefits of reciprocal teaching for English learners specifically. The second part that you'll experience is a demonstration lesson around how to use reciprocal teaching. And again, I'll be using a variety of Zoom features to model how to use reciprocal teaching virtually and how to engage our students in the classroom setting. And so as we begin, the way that we'd like to start is to launch a poll. So we have a poll. We want to understand your familiarity with reciprocal teaching. So Carmen, if you would launch the poll. Thank you. And we'll give you a few minutes to do that. Okay, great. Great. So I'm seeing that it looks like most of us have some familiarity with reciprocal teaching, which is helpful, right? For me as a presenter to know. And similarly with your own students, right? You might want to poll your students about their reading abilities, right? Their comfort levels, what they like in terms of different components of reading, and perhaps what they struggle with and with reading. And that's what I really like about reciprocal teaching, is it's a cognitively respectful way to bring students up to speed when they are below grade level in reading. And in particular for English language learners, it's really helpful because many of our English learners aren't speaking in the classroom setting, right? From ELL shadowing projects that I've conducted across California and across the country, I'm finding that 5 to 10% of English learners are spending their time in academic oral language production, which we know is problematic, right? We learn language by practicing it. We want our English learners to be engaged in the classroom setting and to have an academic identity. And so reciprocal teaching, you get a twofer, right? You get good reader habits with the 4 different roles: summarization, questioning, predicting, and connecting. but you also get classroom talk and dialogue. And Pauline Gibbons tells us that our English learners benefit from classroom talk in a variety of ways. And so she tells us that, hold on a second. She tells us that our English learners benefit most when group work is productive. And not all group work is productive, right? We know that when English learners are in productive and effective group work structures, that they hear more language. They hear more language from a variety of sources, not just the teacher. They speak more language. They speak more language. They take those language risks with each other. They typically understand more language. They understand each other more than they understand us at times. They're willing to ask questions. And overall, they're just more comfortable about speaking when they are in smaller group settings. And so those smaller group settings oftentimes represent little communities, right? A home, if you will, right? Away from home, where I can take those language risks. And Pauline Gibbons tells us additionally that group work has to be set up appropriately in order to be effective in the classroom setting. And I'm going to try to model these 8 characteristics with you today via the reciprocal teaching strategies, the 4 roles. So first, that we have to have clear and explicit instructions when we are engaged in reciprocal teaching. Every student needs to know what's expected of them. We will actually follow up on the website when we post the video. There will be a graphic organizer and the role cards that I'm going to be modeling today with you all, as well as an article. And so students need to be explicit and clear about, right, if I am a summarizer, what am I supposed to do? If I'm a questioner, right, what is expected of me, and so on and so forth. Talk needs to be necessary for the task. Unfortunately, in classrooms, right, we tend to think that a silent classroom is a well-managed classroom. And we want to turn that around, right? And require talk in the classroom setting and not be fearful of talk or losing control. There has to be a clear outcome. So the graphic organizer that I'm going to share with you hopefully will be helpful to you in implementing reciprocal teaching in your classroom. The task needs to be cognitively appropriate, meaning that we're not going to water down the text. We're going to have and hold high expectations, use grade level text, but use each of the 4 reciprocal teaching strategies to scaffold, right, the language so that students can meet that expectation. The task is integrated with the broader topic, so the group roles themselves will be connected. Today, for example, I'll be modeling a lesson about Albert Einstein, his childhood, and his adolescence. And so the group roles, the reciprocal teaching roles specifically, will be connected to this text. Every student needs to be involved. Every child needs to be involved. That's why I like that there are 4 roles so that everybody knows, right, what's expected of them. Students need to have enough time. Too much time, students get off task. Too little time, students get frustrated. And right, with all of these 7 characteristics in place, students will know how to work in groups. So with that, what I'd like you to do next is to, in the chat box, please type in, what are some additional benefits of productive group work? From your experience there are several of us who said we used reciprocal teaching in the classroom setting. What are some other benefits that you can think of? I just went over some of what Pauline Gibbons says about that and what the research tells us, but what do you also understand about that? And then Carmen is going to share with us some of your responses and we'll kind of dialogue a bit about that. Yes, so I'm seeing having sentence starters are helpful. And in fact, with the reciprocal teaching roll cards that you're going to receive, and then I'm going to model using, there will be sentence frames. Yes, so, right, social emotional learning, and especially right now, right, social emotional learning and the trauma of this experience, right, it's important to take into account, right, in these smaller communities of learning. Students feel, right, comfortable working with their peers oftentimes, sometimes, as we suggested, more so than working on their own. And we want to build community. We want to take time to definitely to build community in these reciprocal teaching groups so that students know what is expected of them. I saw a response about use breakouts, and typically I do, and I would use breakouts, and right, reciprocal teaching kind of lends itself to that, because group one could be summarizer, group two could be the questioner. And there will be points in my PowerPoint when I model the lesson where I'll be suggesting this is where when you would break out. For today, because of the webinar, we'll be using the chat box, as I suggested. So lots of great academic language, usage, and practice. So I saw lots of great responses to that first chat box question. And again, we'll have several opportunities throughout the presentation for you all to participate and engage. So why reciprocal teaching? Reciprocal teaching is an oldie but goodie strategy, right? Brown and Polinsker, who are reading researchers in 1985 and in the 80s, really researched reciprocal teaching in an intervention setting in particular. And they found that by using the 4 comprehension strategies, summarizing, questioning, clarifying, in our case, we're going to be using connecting instead of clarifying, and predicting, right, that by using these key strategies, comprehension strategies, that we could bring students up to, right, grade level expectation and have them approximate grade level reading skills. And as I suggested earlier, it also helps in terms of having students take ownership over their learning. Having them, right, become an expert in one of these roles and then lead the group in the discussion when it's their turn. What's really important about reciprocal teaching is that we can't assume that students know how to have these conversations on their own, right? In the classroom setting, we might take a whole week to teach summarization before we ever put them into groups, and a week on questioning, and so on and so forth, right? So that everybody, right, we level the playing field and everybody knows how to complete all 4 roles. And then we practice getting into groups, and then students take over those conversations, right, with each other in smaller group settings. As I suggested, these are the 4 key roles, reciprocal teaching roles that I will be utilizing today in the demonstration lesson. The first is summarization, right? Students need to know how to summarize texts, right? Not just lift pieces of the text, but to really understand what the most important ideas or events or details are and why they're important. So justifying their thinking. Questioning, asking and posing higher order thinking questions, right? About confusing parts or things that they wonder about, pretending they're the teacher, right, if you will, and posing those questions. The predictor role is where students make evidence-based predictions about what might happen next in the story, or using text features at the beginning of a story to determine what the story will be about. And then the connector role. So text to text, text to world, and text to life connections. Our students tend to like to stay at the text to self, right, portion, and we want to move them into text to text and text to world connections. And then the last piece about reciprocal teaching and its effect size, right, the visible learning work, Don Hattie's work, that this particular strategy has a high effect size, right, a large effect size. And that's the effect on achievement, right, academic achievement. It's at the 0.74 level. And so it's worth our while, right? If it wasn't already, The evidence base is there for us, definitely. The story that I'm going to be chunking today and modeling using reciprocal teaching with is called A Boy with Something on His Mind. And this is, you're going to learn a little bit about the childhood and adolescent experience of Albert Einstein. We all tend to know, right, his scientific contributions, right, photoelectric effect, theory of relativity, and so on. But most of us don't know a whole lot, and I didn't until I started reading this, about his adolescence and his childhood. And this is a series by Joy Hakem. She's written a series called The Story of Science, which is written in narrative nonfiction. And it's a really sort of interesting and easy way to enter into, right, some of these more difficult concepts, scientific concepts, through a different genre. So in this case, through the life of Albert Einstein. Some fun facts about Albert Einstein that you perhaps didn't know was that he didn't speak until he was 4 years old. Until the age of 9, he would choose his words really carefully before he spoke. And so, right, his teachers sort of thought that he was, you know, problematic because of that, and perhaps refusing to speak for other reasons. He was really trying to formulate his thoughts clearly, which is why he chose to do that. He had a terrible memory, and in 1921, he won the Nobel Prize in Physics for photoelectric effect, not for his theory of relativity. And you'll see on the left-hand side a quote. So he said, "School failed me, and I failed the school. It bored me. The teachers behaved like field weeble or sergeants. I wanted to learn what I wanted to know, but they wanted me to learn for the exam. What I hated most was the competitive system there, and especially sports. Because of this, I wasn't worth anything. And several times they suggested that I leave. This was at a Catholic school in Munich. I felt that my thirst for knowledge was being strangled by my teachers. Grades were their only measurement. How can a teacher understand youth with such a system? From the age of 12, I began to suspect authority and distrust teachers." And so with that little background knowledge, right, that I've provided about Albert Einstein's childhood and adolescence, what else do you want to know about Albert Einstein? So if you would type that into the chat box, and you'll notice that in this case, what I'm doing is I'm actually starting off with a question, right? So I have purposely, right, to get us to prepare to learn, to understand what you're interested in about Albert Einstein, I've moved the speaking part up to the beginning. So if in the chat box you would type in, what else do you want to know about Albert Einstein's childhood, adolescence? How did Einstein become a scientist after failing in school? How did he do socially? Did he feel connected to anyone? Well, it's interesting. So he is in a boarding school during this time period, and with the subsequent chunk of text that I'm going to read. And he's separated from his family. We know that he also suffered from depression. And so that separation really hit hard for him, right? So socially, right, he wasn't connected because he wasn't doing in a lot of ways what other kids were supposed to do. How did he get to this point in his life in terms of teachers where he was considered a genius? So yes, later on in the text, we find out in the story of science and a boy with something in his mind, we find out that Albert Einstein actually learned best by talking, typically with college students who were invited into the home by parents, and having just discussions about topics that were beyond his teachers' ability at that time, and most students' ability during that grade level. He also learns by going into a shop and working with things hands-on in a very hands-on way. So these more traditional classrooms are really not, where he is thriving. And for many of us, unfortunately, this is the experience of some of our students, right? especially if we're not allowing them to speak in the classroom setting, right? Which oftentimes happens with our English learners. We're not requiring talk. So we don't, right, perhaps see that talent that we know is there, or we should know is there. And so as we move forward, I'm going to read, those were all great questions, and I'm going to read another segment of, or a segment of the text by Joy Hakam. And this is called A Boy with Something on His Mind. Okay, so we're going to learn a little bit more about Albert as we move along with our reciprocal teaching strategies. So you can read aloud, Coralie, with me if you'd like, or you can listen just as in read aloud fashion. So 15-year-old Albert Einstein is miserable. He's trying to finish high school in Germany, but it's a strict and rigid place. To make things worse, his parents have moved to Italy. They think that he should stay behind until his schooling is completed. It isn't long, though, before he's on his way over the Alps, heading south to join them. Why does he leave Germany? Today, no one is quite sure, but a letter from the school offers a powerful clue. Your presence in this class is disruptive and affects others. What are the Einsteins to do with their son? He is a high school dropout who has arrived without warning. And so with that chunk of text, notice that I pre-selected a chunk of text, one that I thought students might be interested in, that might be relevant, right? I started with the questioning role. I'm now moving into the summarizer role. And we want to be really explicit and clear, as we suggested at the beginning, as to what does a good summary include? This is a summarizer role card. And what you might want to do, or what you, eventually I suggested that you will have the role cards themselves. We'll post them to the website along with the video. You'll want to go through, right, what the expectations are very clearly with students. So notice that here, right, explain the reading in 2 to 3 sentences, think like the author, and try to figure out what he or she wanted to tell you. And so what I've done is I've taken the chunk of text that I just read aloud, and I've further scaffolded it for summarization. I've underlined, instead of 3, I underlined 4, right, key details. And I'm going to talk through in think aloud fashion why I selected those. So I thought that Albert Einstein, right, that the fact that he was miserable was important, because it seems to have caused him to be kicked out of school. So I underlined that for that reason. And then I underlined it's a strict and rigid place, because, right, that might be why he's miserable. We know that he learns in other ways, right? His parents have moved to Italy. I thought that was important. So he has been separated from his parents, and comfort, right? And the last, your presence in this class is disruptive and affects others. And this is mostly because I'm interested in understanding what he did specifically to be disruptive. So here are my summarizer frames, and many of you suggested, right, using frames in the first chat box. So my summarizer, I might begin a summary in this way, both orally and in written language. Here's my summary of the most important ideas. I would share this in a breakout online, right, or virtually. I would break students into groups. They would share their summaries. And here's a model or a sample summary. My summary of the most important ideas, the most important information includes that Albert Einstein, and I can't read it because is in high school in Germany, but he hates the school because it is a rigid place. His parents have moved to Italy, which seems to have exacerbated his feelings, right, about school. Albert's frustration is making him disruptive in school. So that's my summary. I would show that to my students. I would show them how I underlined the key, right, the most important details, how I use the sentence frame, right, to begin my response, and how I added, notice those details are in my summary. In the chat box, what we'd like you to do now is please type one sentence, right, of the most important information about Albert Einstein so far. So what do you think at this point is the most important information so far? He did not like school. Good, and we would encourage our students to use, right? My summary of the most important information includes, he did not like school. He didn't fit in, right? We could put these ideas together. His teachers did not understand him, definitely, they did not. My summary of the most important information, he thought differently. Good. Oh, so a couple of ideas here. He thought differently and he did not fit in. He is frustrated and he feels abandoned by his students. He hates school and understands teachers. And what I really like about the responses that are coming in is that we have, right, digested information ourselves, right, and summarized information ourselves using our own words, which we will have to model for our students as well. And so, so really strong responses being shared. What we would do now is, again, what I would do is also use the breakouts, right? Have students have a discussion about their summary, select, pop into the Zooms or the breakout Zoom groups, and I would pre-select a couple of, right, really strong responses that I heard and have them share with the whole group. So the next strategy, which we started off with, the next role is the questioner, right? And we have specific frames for that. My question regarding what I was confused about, my question regarding what I wondered about. And it's so important to have students ask questions at different levels, right? I typically also use a DOK level question frame template, so that we're asking questions across all 4 of the DOK levels. And here are some questions that I wondered about. My questions regarding what I wondered about were, why have Einstein's parents moved to Italy? What has Einstein done to be disruptive? Why does Albert hate school? And what are those examples of rigidity, right? He thought it was a rigid place. So I want to know more about that. And then you'll notice at the bottom, I have where I might, right, move into Zoom. Anything in pink at the bottom, and you'll receive a PowerPoint PDF as well, is where we might accommodate for the breakout. The predictor role. So we want students to make evidence-based predictions, right? So by using text evidence, we want to tell the group what you will read about next. So what is the writer going to say now? What will the rest of the selection be about? And then we always share, right? Tell the group what the evidence in the reading is. Here are my 2 frames for predictions. My prediction is, my evidence is, and then again, we have a discussion. So here is my model of predicting. My prediction is that Albert's parents will be disappointed with his son because he's been kicked out of school. My evidence is that Albert's parents don't know what to do with his son, right? That was in the chunk of text at the beginning. We can move students into breakouts at this time, have them discuss, right? Again, bounce in and out of all of those breakouts, and then have a couple of students share out. But for this segment, what we're going to have you do is, in the chat box, what do you think we'll read about next in the next chunk? So if we were to continue this reading, what is your prediction and what is your evidence? So please, in the chat box, add a prediction and evidence. My prediction is that Einstein will find a better school. Okay, great. And we know that because we kind of know the ending of the story, right? What Albert did in Italy, evidence he went to Italy, and the text has been chronological so far. So he'll be back there. My prediction is that he will not be successful in a new school. My prediction is that Albert will not go to school anymore. So perhaps we think that Perhaps we think that because he learns in a sort of a hands-on way. Maybe there's some homeschooling that goes on. Katie, my prediction is that Einstein will be more successful in a less structured environment where he can think and act more freely. And so we know that, right, if he didn't thrive in such an environment, right, in a strict and rigid place, then we have a good idea about that he might in a place that is less rigid, right? This is the final role, and that is the connector role, right? We want students to make text to text, text to world, text to life connections. As I suggested before, students tend to like to hang out around my own experience, right? So we want to move them into text to world connections and text to text connections. We have specific frames for them to respond and write to, right? My text to text connection was, my text to life, my text to world. And then finally, here's my model, right? So my text to text connection is with Catcher in the Rye. Einstein reminds me of Holden's teen angst and how difficult it can be to become an adult. My text to life connection is that we don't often know what is going on in our students' lives at home, right? Especially right now, we may not know, which is why social emotional learning, and many of you, right, also noted that at the beginning, social emotional learning and relationships in school are so important. I wonder if Einstein connected with anybody in school. We know he did, right, at home during discussions over dinner. But I wonder in school if he had any, right, any relationship of any sort with a teacher. My text to world connection is that I wonder how many students act out because there are family issues going on. Again, I would have moved students into Zoom breakouts, but today we're using the chat box. So if you would, in this final chat box or chat discussion, if you would use one of the frames. So what is your text to text connection, or text to life connection, or text to world connection? And we'll take a couple of those. And you can just select one of them. So do you personally connect with him? Do you connect with Einstein and maybe a student in your class? Maybe another text, maybe your own experience with school. These are some options. My text to life connection is that every student has a unique way of learning. Yes. So we need to let students have more voice in their learning. Yes. And trying to, Tina, understand to begin with, right, what their learning styles or preferences may be so that we can best meet those. Text to life, I often had difficult time learning in traditional classroom. Yes, so right, oftentimes when we have personally struggled in that way, we're more sensitized to, right, creating these different experiences for our students. My text to life connection is often people who are different are seen as outsiders, yes, during their time, and yet later viewed as geniuses, yes, or as extraordinary later in life. That's powerful. I wonder why this is always the case, right? Because we tend to, unfortunately, in classroom settings, it's these, right, it's the traditional and it's fitting in instead of often acknowledging, right, differences. So really powerful. I mean, I hope that all of you are reading through the chat box for, right, additional responses and perspectives. Before we get to questions, and I give this back to Carmen, we wanted to let you know that this whole segment on reciprocal teaching is also outlined in the book, ELL Shadowing as a Catalyst for Change. Chapter 10, it's the second part of the book, and that Corwin is offering a generous discount at this time. So if you want to learn more about that, we will also be posting, as I suggested, so it's corwin.com, but we'll also be posting the PowerPoint PDF, a graphic organizer, the roll cards, and an article that I wrote for Language Magazine along with an English teacher and an instructional coach about how to kind of go deeper with reciprocal teaching. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Carmen, and we can take any questions that the audience may have.
Thank you, Ivannia. I think that you did a wonderful job. I was totally engaged, and I love the responses from the participants.
So
I do think that the connection piece, a lot of you are saying that this is why we have to differentiate. This is why we need to treat each student as unique, and we can apply some of these concepts that we learned today to that exactly. So we have some people. Is this your time to pose some questions? And now that we have Ivannia here with us, take advantage of this moment. You will receive the presentation is recorded, so you're going to be able to review it. And then you're also going to receive materials. And one of the questions that I see here is, how would you pair newcomers with other students for this activity, Ivannia?
good. And I think the whole notion of intentionally pairing students, thank you for that question, is important. That was Jenny. That's right. I mean, we don't want, let's say, a newcomer with a student who might take over the conversation. So what I would do is really take a look at language proficiency scores, to take a look at, and to pair students who are, right, a student who is just above that newcomer's level, who can challenge the language, but not take over the conversation. So intentional pairing. And what I typically recommend are 2 mid-range students, 1 low and 1 high. So a group of 4, 2 mid-range, 1 high, 1 low. So that there are multiple configurations there, so that the high-end student isn't always tutoring the low, right? But then, so that also there is that close zone of proximal development. I think I saw another question.
Yeah, Jenny also asked, especially when they speak different languages, it's important to have that intentional pairing as well.
Yes.
What would you suggest to do with younger students who may need more direction in breakout rooms? That's from Tina.
So I might, right, as the teacher, as I suggested, we're going to want to spend a week, at least a week, right? And with some of our younger students, perhaps more than that, to build up that expertise, right, really deeply around each of the roles, so that when they get to the breakout rooms, they can be more successful, right? I might also work with my higher end students, because you can't be everywhere, right, as the teacher. So what I would do is work with a smaller group of students and help build up their expertise, so that they're kind of the leaders around these 4 strategies. And when they are in breakouts, right, pre-selecting my groups so that I have one expert, if you will, that I've worked with more deeply to assist, right, within the groups.
I think we can take one more question. It says, will you recommend to preview the text vocabulary with your level 1 newcomers? That's from Maria Candelaria Perez.
Yes. Hi, Kande, I know you. Yes, definitely. That is a great, that's a great recommendation. So yeah, providing students, our newcomers, our level 1 students with the text ahead of time, with a word wall or a vocabulary accompaniment, with pictures, right? so that there's that additional scaffolding and support, definitely. How do you say reciprocal teaching in Spanish? That's true. Ganda, you would know. Can you type it in there? Or maybe Carmen? Is that también? Or Ruby? Ruby. Same. Same. Oh. Okay.
So I would assume if it's the same as enseñanza reciprocal.
Okay. Ahí lo puso. Jenny, gracias.
Nice.
Gracias, gracias. Okay. Yes. And thank you, Kande. Oh, and here we have another recommendation.
Reciprocal. Very good.
Instrucción recíproca. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of different ways to. Oh, I do have these reciprocal teaching roll cards translated into Spanish. So if that is, I can post those. Yeah, I can send those. We can post those as well in case you. I have had teachers try this out in a dual language setting.
Excellent. We will be posting those. And if we don't have any more questions, I just want to say thank you, Ivannia, for sharing your expertise in support of all educators and families. This has been a powerful addition to our Teacher Strategies for Distance Learning webinar series. And again, I want to say thank you to Ruby and Dr. Ivannia Soto. Join me in thanking her. And thank you to all of you participants for joining our first webinar on the Teacher Strategies for Distance Learning. On behalf of the CABE Board of Directors and the full CABE team, we hope you have found these strategies valuable to your work with students. Check out our CABE Facebook for more information on our upcoming webinars, and visit our CABE page at www.gocabe.org to find the recording of this session and the handouts. All materials will be posted by tomorrow. So please stay safe, be well, and know that we're all in this together. We are CABE strong. Thank you, and hasta la próxima.
Thank you.